What's going on, folks? Welcome to the YouTube channel and welcome to the first of what will hopefully be many videos to come. I'm just going to go through and show you how I created this small train table for my son to play with. Follow along. I made this entire table out of 1/2-inch lawnwood plywood that I picked up from Lowe's. Not exactly sure what species, but it happened to be on sale, so I picked it up. Now, originally, I was going to maybe make the sides out of 1/2 inch and then the top be 3/4, but I decided at the last minute that I had enough, so I was just going to make it out of 1 sheet just to save some money. Now, what I do is I just cut everything down to rough dimensions using my Craig track saw. Essentially, it's just a little jig that goes onto my rigid circular saw. Now I'm just cutting down everything to the rough dimensions. I knew how tall I wanted it at the time. I just wasn't sure how long I wanted it. Until I figured out exactly how big of a top I was going to make, I just cut it down to rough dimensions. First, I cut the piece for the 2 sides. And then I cut the piece for, I guess, the connecting pieces for those sides. I just picked a random number. Happened to be, I think, 6 inches. It just looked nice beefy piece that I used. I'm just taking my time, making sure all my marks are lined up. The one thing that is frustrating about this Craig track saw is it's not entirely straight. So you have to constantly check your marks. After much deliberation, cuts. Now, here's where I decided exactly how big a top I'm going to go with. I'm pretty sure I just went for like a 36 by 30 top. Just making sure, checking my measurements on the side runners. I made my marks. Then again, using my track saw jig to make those cuts. And listen, we're 2 minutes in. I know what you're all thinking already. John, you have a very messy basement or shop. I know. This, like I said, this is the first video, so it has been taken care of, has been remedied. So future videos, you will not see such a unorganized, cluttered, messy basement. Again, just wrapping up those final dimensions, making my marks, and using my track saw to make those final cuts. Now with the top figured out, I can cut everything down to its exact dimensions. I'm using my DeWalt contractor saw here. You don't need a big fancy saw, but what I do when I like setting it is I'll go to the measurement using the guide, and then I'll use my tape measure to get that exact measurement because it's never too accurate. But as you can see, I had to slide it a little bit and then lock it into place. Okay, here, cutting the side pieces, made them about 6 inches. Key thing here is keeping that board tight to the fence. I got my ears, eyes, and respiratory protection on from those fine dust particles. You'll see in a few shots I have no dust collection, so it's just flying everywhere. Again, something that I will have to remedy in the future, but for right now, it'll do. Now it's time to cut that second piece, and one thing I gotta do in the future is remember exactly what side I need to use to go along the fence. I flipped this over a couple times, realizing, oh, I was right the first time. Just gotta love that sawdust going everywhere. And please pay no mind to the mess in the background. Like I said, I've since remedied some of that mess. Now that I have my 2 side pieces cut, I can start working on the end walls. So I move my saw out to roughly exactly where I want it. It's about 18.5 inches, lock it in. And then again, I'll take my tape measure and get it really dialed in. This gets a good angle of that. Like I said, go into the furthest tooth to the closest tooth to the fence, and then really dial it in. Again, see, I had to make some micro adjustments, but I eventually got it. You'll see coming up, this is where things get a little bit sketchy. I wouldn't say sketchy, but since I don't have an outfeed table to catch these larger pieces, the board, unless you're keeping it tight to that fence, it's going to bind a little bit, and you'll see coming up, it does just that. And like I said, right at the end, panic mode, real smooth, John. Don't worry, I cleaned up those. That's in the end. And final piece. Again, keep trying to keep it tight to that fence. Smooth cut. A little bit more manageable since it's not such a wide piece. Again, keep it tight. Now that we got that cut, show that plywood who's boss. Yeah! Now that we're done with the table saw, it's time to move it over to the miter saw. So I set up a stop block with my contractor stand, just so I can get accurate cuts. I'll actually cut both of these side pieces at once, just so, if it is a little bit off from my measurement, they're both the same, so nobody's none the wiser. And then, of course, always just double check my measurements, just making sure that they're right. And I'm hooking on the wood, not on the stop block. And then I make my cut. Now that those side pieces are cut, I can finally finish the two end walls, getting those down to the final dimensions. Just making my mark. Like I said, I think I made these about 30 inches wide. Back down to the track saw, just to make my final cuts. Then that'll wrap up pretty much cutting everything to length, other than cutting out like little designs. Me figuring out the final dimensions. I knew that I wanted to have some sort of angle thing on the bottom, so I was figuring out the feet, and then like a little angle thing at the top. So it's just kind of figuring me how high I want that little detail piece at the top to come down, and how high the detail piece I want at the bottom to come up. I'm just connecting the lines, and eventually I'm going to figure out the angles that I want. And I really just went 45 degrees, as you can see in a second. Just connecting lines. Take the big square out. Figuring out how to do the angle of the big square. Figuring out the angle. Yeah. And he's got it. Making sure they're consistent. Yeah, like it. Now it's time to clamp those both together. That way I can cut them both out at the same time, very similar to the side pieces. So even if I did mess up, they would be the same. Using my jigsaw here, I'm able to batch these out. Nice and easy again, zero dust collection. And then once I'm done with the bottoms, I move on to the top and pretty much do the same thing. Quick cuts with the jigsaw. And then we're all good. Then once I had those all cut out, it's time to route. I used a 1/4 inch round over bit on every piece. Just taking my time, making sure it was nice, kept them together. That way I could flip it all once and keep it together. Inside first, then the outside. Now, once I finished that up, I took the clamps off. Now, I didn't want where the two side pieces met the end walls to have a round over just because it would look funny. I wanted it to be nice and flat, flush. So I marked those using the sidewall. And then I would route out right up to that mark. Thank God the base is clear so you could see. And then from the top down, again, right up to that mark. So it was a nice flat piece instead of a round over piece. And then once I was done with the end walls, it was time for those side stretcher pieces. Again, 1/4 inch round over, leaving the ends nice and flat, so where they meet the walls, they'd be good to go. And then it was time for everyone's favorite controversial tool, the pocket hole. Yes, I enjoy using pocket holes. It's just an easier way to attach the wood together. I don't really care what people think. It's just easy for me. So that's what I did. I'm using the Craig pocket hole jig. Don't remember which model it was. The biggest pain in the butt, and you'll see it here, is that lever being on the opposite side. I know they make a newer model with the lever to you, but man, that is a pain in my butt. Once we're done with the pocket holes, now it's time for everyone's favorite thing ever. Sanding, 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 and more sanding. I think I started with an 80 grit and eventually wound up finishing it with a 220. Just when you think you haven't sanded enough, oh wait, there's more sanding. I know, riveting stuff. Have I mentioned how much sanding there was? Once I got done with all that sanding, it's time to put some stain on. I'm using the Poly Shades stain. It's a stain and polyurethane mix, so I guess it saves you time. Really got to put it on light at first. Using a brush here. Never really used an actual brush before, but it does tell you to do that in the directions. One thing you really got to make sure of is once you get the stain on, it's kind of just brush everything out to get rid of all of those brush marks. So you'll see as I'll flip it over and kind of just fan it out, make it all one consistent coat. So once I was done with those two end walls, I moved on to the side pieces. I actually ran out of those paint triangle things. So quick tip that I learned is if you run out of those things, just use screws. So for each piece I put 4 screws in, keeps it off the table. That That way I'm able to paint both sides at the same time, just to save some time. And just like that, staining's done. I moved on to the actual top. Doesn't have to be pretty. Grab me some spinach green and just rolled it on. No need to be nice and clean with this. It's going to be a top. You're not going to see the edges. Just dump it on and roll it out. Then after letting everything sit for about 12 hours, I came back and did everyone's favorite task of sanding. This time a little easier, just only 220 grit. Just sand everything up. And then you can see we're going to add our second coat of that poly shades. Nice and easy. Nice. This is a much thinner coat than I did before. Much faster. And again, coming back, feathering out all those brush strokes. That way you don't really see them. Once all that sanding was done and everything was dry for a good 12 hours, it's time to assemble. I love these 90-degree little blocks. Someone mentioned them on a YouTube video that I watched, and I picked them up, and they're absolutely fantastic. Making things simple, super easy, keeping everything 90 degrees, nice and easy, and just block a hole drill. One thing you got to worry about with pocket holes, and you'll see when you're screwing them, they tend to push your piece out a little bit, so you really need to clamp it down to keep it from moving. Just busted out my tape measure and my torpedo, making sure they're in the same spot and everything was level. I did level that workbench before, so I know it's nice and flat. And moved on to the other side. The other side, I figured I'd give it a shot, throw some glue in there, see what the heck happens. I don't think it's going to do much, but it's worth a shot. Again, clamping it up, sliding everything around. One thing that I did do on this side, and then I went back and did to the other side, and you'll see it. I actually threw some 1.5-inch brad nails into the side of this. I figured my son was going to jump on this and play on it and pretty much manhandle it as a 2-year-old boy does. So I figured I'd just add some extra support, and I did go back to the other side and add those in. And it was rinse and repeat. Add some more pocket hole screws in there. The glue. Say goodnight to my son. Two screws. Just throwing my tape across, making sure all my measurements are the same. And this is where I made my big boo-boo. Adding those kind of stretcher pieces to hold the top, and I really messed up twice here. I forgot to change out the 1.5-inch brads out of my brad nailer. And, 1/2-inch little stringer piece, 1/2-inch side piece. You know what happened. And the second mistake is you can clearly see it right now. For some reason, the side little supports are way lower than the other sides. I don't know if I just measured wrong or just wasn't paying attention. But yeah, messed that up, had to take those off. I did eventually redo those. Now just getting the top fit, using a block planer to get everything exactly right to the measurements. And as you can see, I really haven't figured out that I messed up those support pieces. Couldn't figure out why the top wasn't going down. Again, block planing a lot of this. As Shaving it off. I actually ended up doing a back bevel on the back side of that just so it sits in there a lot easier. Like I said, third time's a charm. More planing. Those high spots that I found. As you see, quick look, I did fix those little side supports. Let's see it when I turn upside down to attach the top. And just like I attached the outside pieces, just pocket hole screws all throughout, using those clamps to really squeeze those sides in so it fits nice and tight, so there's no gaps along the edges. And if you look carefully towards that side piece, you can actually see where those screws broke through. I ended up just, cutting them off, knocking them out, and filling it with wood filler, and then coming back eventually with some more stain to kind of cover those up. Then once the top was all done, since this was for my son, I wrote a little message to him that I don't know if he'll ever see, but hopefully we'll be able to keep this train table in the family for a little while. And there you have it. Finished train table for my son. I thank everyone for sticking in with me through this process for the messy basement and everything. I will try to include some links if I can figure it out at the end for more videos and for other social medias.